Welcome to Project Pack number 26.
My name is Martha, and she's Molly, and we're
thank you
here
for
together
having
to do
me.
some tangling with you guys.
We're excited. It's just so crazy to think how many of these little adventures we've gone on. We call them project packs. And as usual, we're working with a specific group of supplies. We're working in a theme, and we invite you to follow along, whether you have our beautiful project packs or not. We welcome you all to come along on this journey. If you're looking to get a project pack, they're available on Zentangle.com or from some of our certified Zentangle teachers. If you do not have one, find something to draw on.
Yeah. This one's a little different because we
is.
are kind of introducing some new Zendala tiles with some
Yes.
new unbelievable pre-strung designs on them.
Yeah, and you would have to buy the project pack to get the exact pre-strung design. Otherwise, you'd have to just figure it out. We welcome that. And these designs are fun. They're brand new. These are not part of our former pre-strung line. They all are brand new, and Martha's chosen one that we'll be working on today. It's a really nice 5-sided piece, so that's going to be really exciting. We are thrilled about this project pack, but what we're really digging into is the idea or the role of the string in a Zentangle practice and how important it is as one of the steps of the 8 steps. And what happened when we were planning this project pack was we really did a deep dive into what we like to call the elegance of limits.
Yeah, and so what we love about this philosophy that we think is pretty primary to the Zentangle method is how we change those thoughts and ideas and connotations of these words like limits and restrictions and turn them into something positive.
Love that.
Yeah.
It's really awesome. So let's get started, and then we'll talk a little bit more about this sort of theme, and we'll do some drawing, right, Martha?
We're getting ready.
All right. Martha's going to be she's going to get us started with all of the materials that she got in her project pack. We have some really neat things here. Of course, the pre-strung Zendala, which is beautiful on our 100% cotton paper. They're hand-drawn designs, and it is some parameters we're going to be working around. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, a black pen, white pen, and then these 3 koi coloring brushes, which we talk pretty in depth about in our introductory video, so you can learn more about those there.
Yes, and you may not have these colors in your project pack, and that's okay.
That is
all of what we're going to do together.
Delivered at random.
Yeah,
so
we can use what you have. So,
more limits.
Yes. So have all your tools at the ready, have them at hand's reach, and this is the tile that we are working on today.
Should we get ready to take a breath?
Yeah.
I think so. Let's take a minute here to honor the first step in the Zentangle method, which is always gratitude. I invite you to either find a focal point or perhaps gently close your eyes. Give yourself a moment to pay attention to your breath. Maybe try to separate out any racing thoughts, any lists, or piling tasks, and just move them aside for now till later. Give yourself this time to focus on your process, yourself, and use it as a purposeful rest to refresh and rejuvenate creatively. I invite you to gently open your eyes.
So I have a collection of quotes in front of me here, and one in particular that I thought was appropriate for this lesson. Apparently, Michelangelo said this.
Apparently. It's really hard to know, but I like it. I'm going to take it. Yeah.
Art lives on constraint and dies of freedom. So we kind of take that and use it as we approach these strings and the safe limits that they allow for us and the inspiration that they provide.
Yeah, one of my favorite analogies for this is actually when you watch like a child play or something, and when they have like a million toys in front of them, they often will pick like the box it came in or something, because it's like, I think that overwhelmingness of having ultimate freedom to play with whatever you want. And then that choice to pick something that's like so primal, right? So you sometimes having so many choices is overwhelming, and to find yourself somewhere else can bring on more creative thoughts.
All right. Well, speaking of choices, we have one choice right now
But
for our pen.
This
and
is
here it
what
is.
we're doing.
We have one black pen, and it's an 03, which is a pen size that we don't use all the time, but I think I love it. It's a great alternative to the one. It's got a little bit more juice to it, and on this bigger surface, I think it's really appropriate.
And we're really going to be using it a lot on these tiles, and I think it's a fun way to sort of have something that can give you a fine line and ink in.
Yeah. So we've got our black 03 and our it's kind of starfish kind of design.
I think that's why you picked it, right?
Yes. And we're going to start off with a tangle that is near and dear to our hearts called Muka, but it's kind of a Muka variation. So I welcome anybody familiar with the tangle to just watch at first.
Does it make it a mucalation?
I think it could.
Okay.
That sounds like a coffee drink, maybe. It's like...
Yes.
Oh. So I'm looking at this beautiful stringed tile here.
I also just want to interrupt why this particular string of all of them is really special, because it's actually very difficult to divide something up by eye into 5 spaces. It's really easy to do like 4,
true.
and it's easy to do 8 and all of those things, because you just kind of do in half and then in half again. But 5 is sort of this really magical thing, and you see it in a lot of spaces. So I was drawn to this particular mandala form just by itself because of this sort of uniqueness about it. So I think this particular string is going to become very...
We're doing the best one, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, sort of, yeah. I mean, which is what happens often.
Well, speaking of 5, as we look at this, there's a lot of lines going on, but I want you to focus on this center point here and how it goes into these 5 sort of radiating curved lines that kind of start the star shape. So we're going to be focusing on one of these lines that goes from the center to the point.
Using the string line, not necessarily the space.
Yeah, so I'm going to be using that string line to start my drawing, and using it until I don't want to use it anymore. So feel free to watch along. Starting in the center, I'm going to draw a Muka shape, but I really want to make sure that I kind of tip this edge here. I'm going to use that kind of as my guide. So I'm going to follow along the string line, and then I'm going to go rogue a little and touch that line. And then here's where we get a little crazy.
What?
We're doing this kind of very random, wavy kind of finish.
Yeah, so you went, we always say watch first, and this might be something you do a couple times on another piece of paper. But I love that. She's like regular Muka, and then all of a sudden it's like in a totally different direction.
So I'm going to add a mate to this little Muka guy here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave just a very fine space and actually aura this first one. And then go off and touch my string line. Wherever you end up, you just want to touch the string line. And then create this very random kind of inner Muka.
Yeah, I love that. It's very like undulating stroke. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's so fun. It has a, is it like not a fern, but like some,
maybe
a fern.
Have a wavy, lettucey kind of look to it.
Yeah, very fun.
So we're going to do that on all of these lines, these total 5 lines. We're going to create these little couplets, if you will. So here we go again, along the string line. And then when you feel ready, you kind of break off and touch the edge. And then do this randomy little... And a fine aura. And break away. turning my tile. So appreciative that these string lines are here for me, very supportive and following along. And kind of going rogue.
So fun.
It is fun. Fun watching it kind of unfurl.
It's also a very creative way to fill the space. Again, we looked at this string and just sort of tried to have some outside the box thoughts about how can we creatively create composition here that's not so predictable.
And I think that's a good word. It's not predictable. I mean, yes, you could treat each section as sort of a reticula and fill them in, and it would be beautiful. But here we are kind of putting our artists' glasses on.
What else is possible here?
Yeah.
But also using, I think, the support and the guidance of this beautiful string. So it's like, I think it's a combination. And we often use a term called, it's a suggestion, not a demand. And I've always loved that thought process to be, look at all these suggestions that we get from a template or a form.
So I know it's starting to have this kind of wild, undulating underwater feel to it. Now we've kind of further broken up our space, and we're going to see where this takes us now. So one of the things that, to me, these interesting, unpredictable, wavy lines creates is these little nooks and crannies, if you will, that to me just beg for a little ink here and there. So I'm going to go back into each one of these, and you can see how that changes it right off the bat. Right in front of your eyes, you're creating these shadows and kind of dimension with simple wavy lines. So I'm just going into each Muka and adding ink. Sometimes it's just a dot of ink, that's all you need. But just a little, rounding into these round edges makes such a difference. And each one is decidedly different from the last one. And it's the difference, it's the consistency of differences that creates the pattern. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we save this process for the end of a tile composition, but certainly it's allowed on every step of the way. Sometimes it helps you pause when you're not quite sure what to do next.
I think that's like something we get from Mom. She often does that, like just in between tangles or in between sort of her stream of artistry, she'll go around and add rounding or weighting just to kind of redefine what it is she's working on.
So that looks very cool.
Very, very cool.
Yeah. So before I hand this off to Molly, I'm going to add another little detail here. And just in that fine aura space that we created when we were making these sort of Muka couples here, I'm just going to add kind of some kind of very baby checkerboards. Baby! Yeah, just little.
Oh, I actually love this detail. It's subtle, but does a lot.
Yeah, kind of sticking them together. All right, so I think I'm going to hand it over to Molly.
Awesome, I'm ready.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
All right, thanks, Martha. I am going to happily add to this very cool design already. I said to Martha when we were going back and forth on different options, I already had told her that I think what I was so drawn to was this initial design. So one thing I love to offer you, of course you're following along in a lesson, but what's fun with project packs is you could go back in and say, I'm just going to do this part, and then I'm going to go in my own direction and add something different. So you can actually do project packs over and over again, using the same supplies, using different supplies, using half of the idea. It's like endless.
It's like a buffet.
It's pretty great. So I'm going to be playing with another tangulation. Martha and I have been playing with this one for a bunch of time. I know we did it in a class years ago. And Martha wants to call these festoon berries.
Festoon berries.
Off the record, or on the record. But it's basically a tangulation of poke root, but it has a little bit more pizzazz to it. So my vision or my thought here is that I'm going to try to put just one big festoon berry inside this almost heart shape where these mukas are creating. So I always invite you to kind of follow along for a minute here, and then we will see where we get. So just like poke root, I'm going to draw a stem, and my stem's going to probably end basically in the middle of this beautiful space here that she's created. And I love how she went and kissed the edge of this template to like already create space. So we have this closed off space here. And I'm going to start off by making this beautiful stem, pretty close together stem, not too big. And then instead of putting my poke root hat on it, I'm just closing it off simply, just very simply. It's a little bit different. A little more straightforward here. So we have this nice little stem.
It kind of mirrors the spaces between the mukas too. So you're creating these consistent spaces, not just lines. It's also the spaces left behind.
And now I'm going to create a relatively smaller berry here to begin with. And when I draw that berry, I almost want that stem to be like sort of in the middle of my berry. So just a little berry here. And of course, I invite you to just watch here for a minute. And as you can see, I'm inking in this berry to begin with here. Ink always adds to a composition. I always tell people that. Okay. Beautiful little pokeberry. Or what do we call it? Festoon berry. Yeah.
Well, it's not a festoon berry yet.
It isn't, yeah. And so I'm just going to create a fine aura here for my next loop, kind of pausing at the stem. A nice fine one. And then my next aura is going to be much bigger. And so sometimes a bigger aura is a little bit more challenging, but I want it to kind of fall behind some of this stuff. So if you watch me here for a minute, I'm basically going to draw a big circle around, aura circle around here that, completes this space. But just watch for a minute here. It's going to kind of...
Definitely using our drawing behind skills here.
Right. And then, so it's almost like a circle that fell behind. I really want it to kind of fill as much of this space as we can. I'm going to now, this is the festoon part, I'm going to add in some ribs, sort of like ribs on a mushroom, that are very fine together, and they all radiate from the center. So really focusing on if these ribs.
That's a little fancy highlight you got going on.
Oh yeah, that's she's noticing. This is something I learned from my mom. But I am sort of playing around with my pen pressure a little bit, maybe pressing hard and then lifting up my pen a little bit. Something you can kind of fool around with. This O3 is a little bit more robust than a 1. I mean, I don't want to go too crazy, but you can kind of play around with pen pressure a little bit. And I think you want to get kind of close together with these because it does create a beautiful texture. So the further apart you are, the less of that contrasting texture you're going to pick up on. Already pretty,
really pretty.
right?
Yeah, I love it.
Love it. And I love the way it kind of plays with these mukas. So that's our first festoon berry. You guys ready to do another one? All right, let's rock and roll. So again, on this beautiful stem,
then a smaller berry. So you start off with the smaller one, kind of focus in on what you're doing, take your time. I love the unpredictability of this, filling in the background with something that's organic and unpredictable, and each one's going to be a little bit different because you're kind of reacting to that different space that was created. And just taking your time, at this point in time, we have a lot of things going on, so you want to just, try to make sure you know where your lines are filling and where you're starting and stopping, and just take it slow. You're doing a great job. Thanks. It's nice to have a built-in cheerleader. Well, we were just kind of discussing that last night, Molly, weren't we? We were saying one of your daughters was saying cute that if nobody was going to be complimenting her on her when she was really little or her outfit, she would just sort of say it out loud to herself, like, "Oh, I love your outfit today. Oh, thank you very much." But maybe we all need to do that. Like, wow, I really love this tile. Well, thank you. I think it came out great. I think we should start doing this. I think that would be great. That sort of inner language of support and love. I think we all need that. Not only that, the thank you is too, like you did it. You complimented yourself. Yes, like that's good. You compliment yourself, and then you thank yourself for doing it. All right. Good. I like this. This is pretty awesome. So we are going to add one more detail, and it'll probably only show up in a couple places because we've gotten so big. But I think what I'd like to do is just kind of aura that circular shape with a really fine aura. Like we said, this is going to be a little bit of a... So you're auraing the berry. The outermost berry. Exactly. And I think it just kind of maybe solidifies the form a little bit. You can see the difference here. It just adds a little bit. These are things you can decide along the way in any of your tangling. Just, to me, it's like, I always think it's like breathing room. Yeah. All right. So we're getting a little bit closer. I wanted to kind of do a little bit of a few things. I think down towards the bottom here, just for emphasis, I'm going to ink in if you have any space to just really make that stem pop. So I'm just going to go back to the bottom, and if I have any sort of questionable spaces, this one looks like there aren't any. And it has a little bit, just adding a little more ink. All right, so I'm looking at my composition here, and even just adding that little bit of black down here has made me think that I think we need a little more black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in this space and this space. So if you looked at your Mukas and they have this heart shape, we're going to kind of fill in here. We're going to leave our shark fins untouched, okay? So I'm going to start over here. And ink that. And these are the type of things, as you build a composition, you're going to want to really kind of look if you need to do that on your composition. So I'm trying to create a form, and I think this ink is going to help create form. And you can always create more form in different ways. You can do it with more texture tangles, more whatever tangles. You can do it with shading. You can do it with color. You can do it with ink. And that's what we're doing right here. A lot of times on Zendalas, we will either begin with ink or we'll add it in at some point in time to really block out your composition. Just taking our time, kind of enjoying this process with the smaller pen. I could get a lot of detail with it. And so you're going right to that string line that's between the Mukas that create the heart space. Yeah, and we're going to leave those shark fins, what we're calling them right now, all alone. just take your time with your space and really figure out where you're filling in. Sometimes if you get wrapped up into like being so close to your tile, you can maybe ink in an area you didn't intend to. And if that happens, I want you to take a deep breath and figure it out. Figure out something else. Like either keep going and then decide to ink in all of a different area, or maybe you take a breath and you take a minute and you figure out that like, okay, my tile's now gone in a different direction and now I have my own set of limits to figure out, but work with it. And a lot of times you have to just walk away for a minute or put down your pen for a minute and then be like, I got this. All right, that actually went faster than I thought, but I think it probably took me a while, but I was like in such a zone that I was like really enjoying it. I actually really love the way it looks right now. So it might be that you're like very much into this and you're like, let's just take a break. But Martha and I are going to add some more, but I think that pause for a second and just check this out for sure. All right, so I'm going to go in and add just a little bit more detail before we get to some other fun things. So I'm looking at these original kind of Muka shapes here, and I want to add some detail, and that is just something very simple around the edge here. And I'm just going to do kind of a ball fringe, kind of lacy edge here on both sides. Really complements the little checkerboard or the striping you have there in between. I know, it's kind of like that's what would naturally come out of this kind of stem here. And then I'm going to aura these cute little, just to create like an interesting aura line. Cap it off on the end here. Do that around all of these Muka shapes. Of course, all of these sort of little details are just suggestions. And perhaps it's something that inspires you to do something a little bit different. So I don't know, Molly, what do you think? Want to add a little color, maybe?
Oh my goodness. I think we should, though.
All right, so we can't...
because we can.
Because we can.
And it's just pen and paper, and we can take chances, and I think we should. Okay, so I do think we should add some color here. And at this point, you have all already watched our introductory video, or if you haven't, I recommend that you do. We're working on a cotton paper, so it's a little bit different. It's not just like smearing across there smoothly. There's some nuances you got to play with, and there's a lot of different options for how to do this. And if you're like a little nervous, you can try some things on another piece of paper. One, I've been working with these koi brushes. I've been using a scrap piece of paper. Maybe you have stuff you can find in your trash or piece of cardstock to use as almost like a palette. And you can put the marker onto that surface and also incorporate that in. So what I've noticed when I'm working with these is I like to add the water as soon as possible because it dries a little fast, and the more wet it is, the more it blends. So I have the back of a different tile, and you've seen some of this in the intro video, but let's see, I'll get my brush. I have my brush and my water right close by. So if you were working this edge right here, and we put a little purple there, quickly find some water, and kind of watch how get kind of some cool effects, right? It's actually,
I think one of the key things to consider or to remember when you're doing this, especially if you haven't worked with it before, is to work in very small spaces.
Yeah.
Because you want that inky color to not fully dry before you hit it with the water.
Right. So I'm just kind of putting down a little color and then going back in with it with a very wet brush. and kind of pulling it out. And then, of course, the more space, the more marker you put down. If you were to color in a whole space, obviously, the more concentration of ink you're going to get. But this is like a watercolor effect, so it's kind of loosey-goosey, and you can kind of play around with different results, and it's not exact, and the colors might dry kind of interesting, so you kind of need to be open to some different things. It's always good to practice again before we begin on our actual tile, and just be open to what's going to happen. So I'm going to put some purple really close to the edge here I'm going to go over it a few times.
And you can use any of the colors.
Yep, and I just picked purple because I have purple. And then I'm going to pull it down, blending it, just taking my time. Doesn't have to be exactly perfect. And I'm going to put a little bit more down here, and you can do this however it works for you. I'm just going to put some in this little spot here, and then do the same kind of. And the reason I'm not coloring in the whole thing is because I'm enjoying this kind of nuance of color, and that's what's kind of fun about these really rich colors here.
And we're also going to tangle on top of it. So
I know.
You don't want it to be so saturated that your black ink gets lost in it.
You can put this on your piece of paper and pull off some from the paper. Add it too. So that's an option. So it's very nice. Yeah. It's kind of a little bit of a different look.
The next one is not going to look the same at all. It's going to have a different layered effect because you're going to be putting it down differently.
Right. And I wouldn't put the marker right down on like soaking wet paper, but you can play with it on kind of like damp. So kind of neat. And we're going to, like Martha said, we're going to actually be going over this with tangles, which is the idea. So this is really just a backdrop. I like to put down some layers of it. A little water.
Yeah, I think the key really is to get water on all that you've put down right away, and then you spread it out.
Yeah. Very cool. I'm kind of do it in sections. I try to not put the marker on the super wet part, but and then it kind of meets, which is neat. You may spend some time playing around with these on a different surface. You get the feel for it. And you might also be like, that is not my vibe, but thanks for the offer. And I'm just going to keep it, without, and that's totally fine too. I do recommend like embracing how the color changes like that, because once you put the tangles over it, you get to see this really cool sort of variance in the underneath. I think it's very cool. Remember to turn your tile a bunch because the brush will be easier to navigate, like if you're have the point working towards whatever edge you're working.
That looks wonderful.
So fun. Really pretty. So before doing the next step, you might let it dry a little bit so that you have access to the middle, because we're going to add a little bit more color. So I think that's up to you. I'm picking another color. I'm going to play around with this pink one, whose cap is actually very deceiving because the color looks like that. Doesn't really look like the cap, but we're going to be playing around with these festoon berries, which are very cool. And I'm going to be putting a little color around this middle part, and then a little color around the outside part, and then adding some water, and we're going to see what's going to happen. So
I have noticed the pink picks up a little bit of the ink, but I wouldn't worry about it because once we add the water, it'll kind of all blend together. And you can easily clean off your pink pen with just by drawing on it on your surface. I might pick up a little more pink. Very, very pretty. And I like to I'm almost trying to use like a little bit of the edge of the marker, just like putting down some color. It's like teaching yourself to use these new materials. All right, so this looks very cool. I'm like really excited about it. And I think what we're gonna do is we're just gonna let it dry a little bit and then we will revisit it and put on our next layer. Our tile is drying and there's some things that we can do now where we can sort of avoid the color and kind of let it set and let it dry. And what I'm going to do to start is to just hold this precious starfish in by outlining the perimeter with black ink. So I'm going to actually trace all along the outer edge and kind of clean up that little edge. Yeah, I love that. And this would even be like if your edges got really rough with the watercolor, I recommend just really auraing that to have this sort of inconsistent edge would be really cool. So I just started and you can see, so I already have a black line here, so I don't have to really do anything there. So it's basically just these kind of shark fin edges. And that connects like that. So now that I have this kind of tightened up, I am going to now do an aura line. I know, can you believe it? There's so much aura in here. Well, it's just these nice, again, it's like that little change and difference that you may not see right away, but it's all of these little things that add. There, love it. Coming together. So I'm going to introduce a detail here that, again, it's an option for you, and it's just kind of a fun little way of adding a little movement, I would say. And we're going to draw a little edge to this that is basically just little kind of skinny little, now what would you call them? Like almost like fringe on the edge. Fringe on the edge of our French fries on the, I was going to say on the edge of your rug, but kind of different lengths, different little, and kind of just turning your tile as you go, adding these fun little, some of them going this way and that. Definitely sort of a nice meditation as you go around. So this is just a real kind of fun little whimsical thing to add around the edge, but you might have some other fun little fringy element. This kind of just gives it a little, I love it. Yeah, I think it's really neat. Very active. Yeah. Cool. As I look at this tile, of course, we have like layers of stuff we're adding and playing around with. At any point in time, you can say, I really like it the way it is. I think I'm going to leave it. Enough is enough. But we're here to deliver all kinds of options. So here we go. We're going to have some fun. We're going to put some crazy and Zeppel into these little shark fin areas. Crazy and Zeppel is all about sort of creating a crazy grid, similar like to how you might draw a hollowbar, but except we are not doubling the lines. So these are just kind of crisscross crazy lines. And what we're trying to do is really create a series of spaces to then put, well, it will show you in another second, more spaces, so more shapes. So you really don't want to make them too much smaller than that. Once you have your grid, we'll then go in and sort of create these orbs that are smushed into each space. So what I like to do is kind of trace the straight lines and then kind of curve where they curve. So it creates this really cool, very subtle pattern.
You don't want to retrace the corners.
Right. So I'm basically like what we like to say is stuffing a balloon into a angular box. Basically gives you these kind of interesting sort of, almost looks like a stone patio or something. And oh, that's really pretty.
It looks so good with that very variable color underneath, unpredictable.
So each one can be a little different. Like I said, you don't want to make the shapes too small or you're going to lose the inzeppleness of it. So make sure you're kind of paying attention to these grid shapes and you don't break it down too much.
Wow.
That looks really good. I love it.
Yeah.
Martha, that's so great.
Well,
should we add a little shading maybe?
just a little.
But I don't know if we need much. One place I think that I would start, and I was thinking about this when Martha was dancing around with her fringe, is just to add a really thin bit of graphite right around the edge of the fringe. And I'm really using a sharp pencil right close to the edge. And then just sort of blending it a little bit.
Yes.
It kind of, I think, tightens it all up. Again, using the point of the pencil towards that edge so you can kind of get it right up to the edge. We might have went a little overboard on this tile, so don't expect this much every time. This is me and Martha every time. We're like, well, why don't we like just keep it simple?
We really did say that.
We did. We're like, let's just do like, we could have stopped right in the beginning because that was pretty cool too. But you know what? This is a lesson we're learning. I'm looking around here. I think I'm going to put a little bit over the watercolor right here. Just want to show what we can do here. Just a little bit right there. I do like the Muka's kind of so like stark. I think that's cool. Just adding a little graphite. All right, so a little dark right there, but then a little highlight. I'm going to use my other. Just a little bit, yeah.
No, I do love that. That makes it more festoony.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty fun. I could probably keep going, but I shouldn't. Just cut me off. I think that's time to stop. But it's a really pretty tile. It's fun stuff. We explored a lot. We learned a lot. Should we chop it? We should definitely chop it. There we go. Oh, it's gorgeous, Martha. It's great. Like I said, we learned a lot. We worked within our elegance of limits. We tried some new things. And
we created something beautiful.
I think so too. Thanks for tangling along with us. We'll see you soon.
Thanks. See you soon.
Bye.